Hi, I'm Zen and welcome to this video on how to add useful form hints. This is going to be the most underused and badly implemented UX system in web design. And that is coming from me, someone with, as Blackadder would say, has the artistic talent of a cluster of colorblind hedgehog in a bag. So what we're going to create here are these form hints here. The idea of these are to help to guide the user into filling in the form correctly first time to minimize their own frustration, but also potential server wastage time on wrong data being submitted. Now, I know what you're thinking. If you need help filling in this form, that is the least of your worries, but obviously this technique can be applied to any form or any system that you are building. So let's get into it. All right, time for the standard housekeeping blurb that I do. So if you want to get straight into the action, please just jump to the code you can see on your screen right now, or have a look in the comment sections where we've got all the chapters for you to jump straight into. Right, if you're still here, okay. If you don't already know, this video is part of the Into the Wild Easy Build series. If you haven't watched the other videos, it might be a really good idea to do so, and a link to the series should be appearing in the corner right about now. Now, if you're completely new to this channel instead, but want to have the same setup as I'm going to be using to make following along a lot easier, then please click on the link that should be showing up right now to the Getting Started series, which will include the installation of the software as well as the pen drive system that I have all programs that I'll be using in my videos. If you don't want to do that, well, that's fine. You don't hurt my feelings, and I've still got your back. The resources that you need to follow along in this video are in the descriptions below. And if you are new to my channel and you haven't done any of the previous videos, you'll just need the site files. Okay, if you have been following all my videos, then thank you very much. Then you already have all of the resources you need if you did the last video. As always, there will be a HTML page as well for you to work on if you don't fancy working on the PHP files. So once again, the aim of this video is to create these here, which are the hint icons, which then bring up the actual help once you put your mouse over them. And what's nice about this is that all of this is done in pure CSS. No JavaScript is required. Now, we have already created the HTML in the previous video, but we shall have a quick look at it again. So here we are in the login page, and we can see the standard label and input form, but it is this section here that we are interested in. You can see that we've got a simple div with a class of form help and a question mark, and then next to that we actually have a div with a class of form info with the code hints or filling in hints, whatever you want to call it, there. And then we've got the closing divs and the important new line to separate one form element from the other. And as you can see, this is repeated for all of our input fields. So time to go to the CSS and see what we need to do to make it all work. So in the previous video, we added this rule, which is display none in the form help. And because the info is a child of help, that also hid that as well. So what we're going to do first of all is just to remove that attribute and save it, and then relook at the page. And this is what we get. We can see we've got the question mark and the actual info information there. So because there's two parts here, we really want to first of all format the question mark first before we start sorting out the actual info help or the info tags. So what we need to do is to actually hide this information whilst keeping the question mark. Now this is something you should be able to do on your own. So pause the video because you're going to see the answer coming up in 3, 2, 1. Now, as we can see, this is the same code base we had in the form help, but we just knocked it into form info. Now let's go and view this page. So with the text gone, we can now see that the question marks are just sitting here on the new line, and we actually want it up here to the right of the input field. We're also going to want to be able to change its color so it is white, make it larger so it's more visible, and maybe make it bold so it stands out a bit more. As well as perhaps just making sure it's not quite next to the input field itself, so maybe just a little margin to keep a little bit of separation. So this is a code that we need, and as you can see, it's all very straightforward code, literally what I read out at the start. So let's save this and see what it looks like. As we can see, this looks more or less fine, but just a question mark on its own does look a bit weird, which is why we need to create the circle around it. And now this is actually a very simple trick. All we do is that we add a border around the question mark, and then we give it a border radius of 50%, and that's all there is to it. Now, to be fair, to make it work a bit properly, we are going to need to add a width and height values and center the text within it, and it will look something like this. So you can see we've also added a position relative and set the cursor style to pointer to represent it is an interactive element on the page. So again, saving this and seeing what it looks like, and there we have it, a nice working hover system. Well, the system's not working, but at least we've got the design looking correct. Now this design I think works fine for this particular layout, for this particular website. On other sites you might want it smaller, you might want it bigger, you may not want the circle. You know, you can style it completely how you like. You may even want to go with something like this, for example, where it's just a lot smaller, a little bit less intrusive. Okay, and that means that if you only want it on one or two of the fields, it doesn't look so bad. It doesn't make it look weird when it's missing from the other places. Like I say, experiment, play about with it, make it bigger, make it smaller, change its position. You know, you might prefer something completely different. Once you finish doing it, put it in the comments below. Let me know what your preferred style is. Anyway, let's get it back to the normal variant again. Now we have the help button done, we need to get the help text to show up when we roll over the help button itself. The first thing we need to do is to change the display none rule to visibility hidden in the form info, and also set its position to absolute. And if we don't, things do get ugly, and I'll show you what I mean. So here we have it with just visibility hidden. We've not added the position absolute. And when we look at the page and we refresh, it goes completely nuts. Okay, and the reason for this is simply because the text isn't in position absolute. You see, when we use display none, not only does it hide the text element, but it also removes it from the flow of the document. However, when we swap to visibility hidden instead of display, the element, even though it's still not shown, it is still within the document flow, which is what messes up the positioning of the rest of the page. However, when we set it to position absolute, as you know from our previous videos, that takes it back out of the document flow, so it still looks nice. So here we have with position absolute added in, we refresh the page and we go back to normal. So to get the help text to show up, we have to use a little bit of clever CSS, and this is where we use a combination of what is known as a direct descendant selector and a pseudo class to create a condition in CSS to make the text become visible when the mouse rolls over the help icon. Sounds complicated? Well, let's have a look at it. So this is the code here that we need. And although it's not very long, it can be a bit intimidating. So let's just quickly break it down. The form help, as we know, is the parent tag. As again, we go back to the HTML, we can see it's a parent tag here with the info as the child. So next we have the pseudo tag here, which is hover. Now, if you look at the navigation series of videos, if they've been done, and if so, they may well be a card showing up right now, but this is a classic thing that's used on navigations, which is a hover state. So what this section says is, if there's an element with a class or form help and the mouse is rolling over it, then we have this, which is the direct descendant. So it's saying that if it has a child called form info. So when we put it together, it basically says, if there's a parent tag called form help or with a class of form help in which it's been hovered over by the mouse and it has a child, a direct child with a class of form info, then set this rule to form info. Okay, and that's what it says, visibility visible. So we're basically reversing that rule there. So again, let's save this and see what it looks like. So here we are back on the page, and when we move our mouse over the top, we can see the text is shown for all of them. Now, admittedly, it looks pretty ugly at the moment, and that's something we're going to fix, but at least we know that when we take our mouse away, it disappears. So we've got the system, the functionality working. All we've really got to do is to make it look nice. The first thing we're going to do is to give it a background color so the text is easier to see irrespective of the background. We'll give it a border radius so it's not a squared off rectangle it's sat in. And we'll give it some minor padding so it's off the side of the wall. And obviously we're going to change the font size and maybe even the color of the text as well. So we're going to format this text so it looks a lot better. First thing we're going to do is to give it a background color. So irrespective of what's in the background, we can see it a lot clearer. We'll add in a border radius so we don't get these sharp edges. And we'll give it some minor padding just to take the text away from the wall. And while we're at it, we will reset the font size. So this is the code that we've added. And to be honest, these 4 lines, it doesn't really matter if it is in form info or in the hover section. I prefer it in the info. That's just my preference. It makes no difference. So let's save this and see what happens. So checking this code, and although it's working, it's not really working properly. First of all, it's a very thin vertical piece, and it's also showing up behind the button, and that's not very helpful. It might be nice to actually move it away from the button itself. The text being behind is a Z-index issue, which we briefly touched on in the previous video. And again, as I said back then, it is the same idea as what you have in graphic applications where you have layers and you can have things with a higher Z-index being over top or things with a lower Z-index. The way that it's organized within the browser can be a bit confusing at times, but luckily, we can use the Z-index attribute to move it around. So let us fix this part of the code. Here is the extra bit of code. Now we've got Z-index of 10. Any number would have done. And you see I've done some positioning here just to move it around a bit. And then we've got this one, the width max content. This is one of the type of rules that I don't use much outside of grid-based systems, but it is an amazing value to use. It basically ensures that where possible, that the container will always make sure it is wide enough to hold the content. So in the case of the text that we're using, the container, which is the form info, will make sure it is as wide as the longest piece of text. So let's save it and have a look. And here we can see that is far better. And as you can see how the container is changing its width to fit the text. Very nice. And this would be good enough as it is. And we can see that the Z-index is also making sure that it is above this vertical line. Even though it's not near the actual image anymore, the icon, it is definitely going above the vertical bar. So we're just going to add one little small finesse. And that is we're going to sort of create a mini sort of speech bubble effect. And here's the code that we are going to use. Now, we did use the after pseudo element in the previous video, and in this one we're using the before. I'm pretty sure that if you watch the other video, you understand what this one will do. So as usual, we're going to have an empty content, and we see we set a width and a height of 2rem, basically making it square. Background color is black, matching the original one. We've got position absolute, and then we've got the position of it along with a 0.5 border radius, just so to get rid of the sharp edges, and a Z-index of -2, because we want this to show behind the main text so it doesn't obscure any of that text. And then we have this bit here, which we haven't touched on before, and it is the transform attribute. And again, this is an entire series of videos coming on this. Not quite sure when though. So I don't want to go into too much depth here. And to be fair, this text does make it look quite straightforward. What we're doing here is rotating my little 2rem square, a 20 pixel square, by 45 degrees, turning it into a diamond shape. So let's just have a look at that effect. Save it and we review it, refresh the browser. And now we can see it looks a bit like the speech bubble. And as you can see, if you think about it, that is just 1/2 of the diamond. So we rotate the square 45 degrees, hidden half it behind the normal piece to give us the lovely effect. And my job here is done. Thank you for saving me all the way. If there's a video you want me to do, or if you want to shout out in one of the future videos, or want to ask me anything, please just whack it in the comment section, as at least at the moment, because I don't have any comments, I do read every single one of them. See you guys next time. I'm Zen, signing off.